Here, second service, you may be relieved to know that I'm using a sippy cup this week, so just want you to know. So here we go. It happens occasionally, but it happened twice just this week. Two different men on two different occasions said, "Pastor, do you remember that sermon you did on fill in the blank?" And I got to admit, both times I didn't. So they reminded me, and that exchange made me realize some of what I consider oldies may in fact still be goodies and ought to be resurrected. So I'm going to do that from time to time when Pastor Josh doesn't have us going through a particular season and it's my turn at the plate. I'm going to do what we call a standalone message. And sometimes I'm going to do requests. So if you got a request, send it to me. To kick it off today, I'm going to preach a sermon I preached way back in January 2008, a message entitled, "When Ordinary People Trust an Extraordinary God." So here we go. When I was in high school, I worked at a Texaco gas station. Anybody remember that famous Texaco jingle? "You can trust your car to the man who wears the star." Help me out. The big, bright Texaco. All right, thank you. And at our Texaco store, we were, it used to be called full service, meaning you could trust your whole car to that gas station. We would hand wash your sedan inside and out for $3.50. We'd change your oil, check your belts and fluids, even lube your chassis for $4. And tune-ups, plugs and points included, was $10. But my most lasting memory working at that gas station was what gas cost. Because one summer, we pumped gas, washed your windshield, checked your oil and radiator, plus the air pressure in your tires for 18.9 cents per gallon. Yeah, I am that old. So it was quite common for people to pull up to the pumps and order $5 worth of regular. And on the weekends, teenagers who'd spend the entire night dragging the main. Anybody remember that? They would get $1's worth. And those almost 5 gallons would last almost the whole night. I remember one time a carload pulled up. They pooled all their money. All they had was 73 cents. So I pumped 73 cents of gas. But I didn't, cheap people, I did not clean their windshield. That's funny only because my boss just hated it if we skipped that stuff. Well, gone are the days when we can order $2 or $3 of almost anything. It's almost an obsolete phrase. But I've got in my files a poem that really illustrates what I want to talk about today, and it harkens back to that obsolete phrase. It goes like this: "I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Not enough to expose my soul or disturb my peace, but enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, but not a new birth. I want about a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I'd like $3 worth of God, please." I'll be honest, for way too long in my life, that's what I wanted. About $3 worth. I didn't frame it that eloquently, but that was the truth of my heart. You see, like Josh, I was a pastor's kid, a PK we called us. So I was surrounded by God stuff 24/7, to the point I think maybe I was too exposed. Because for way too long, I was like that kid who came home from Sunday school, and man, he was stoked. His mom was excited that he was excited, and she said, "What was your lesson about, Billy?" "Well, it was about Moses and the Israelites and how they got out of Egypt." Mom knew the story, but she asked anyway, "Tell me about it." "Well, you know how the Israelites wanted to leave, but Pharaoh wouldn't let them?" "Yeah." "Well, Moses got really ticked, So he reached inside his special forces flak jacket, grabbed his radio, and shouted, "Israelites, we are out of here." And then they snuck out, Mom. Except they ran smack dab into the Red Sea. They didn't know what to do, so Moses grabbed his radio and ordered some Chinook helicopters to fly in pontoons. Mom said, "Pontoons?" "Yeah, pontoons." And they built this huge bridge, and then Moses led everybody across, ordered in 2 F-22 Raptors to bomb the bridge, and they drowned the whole Egyptian army. Well, Mom was a little upset. I mean, what are they teaching those kids down at that church? "Billy, is that exactly how the teacher told the story?" He said, "Nah, but if I told you the way she said it happened, you'd never believe it." That was me as a kid. I believed in God. I just didn't believe, well, God. I didn't buy enough of Jesus to fill the whole tank, to make me do something stupid like believe the unbelievable. I bought just enough of Jesus to keep the parents out of my grill, to ease my guilt, and to go to church camp. This may surprise you, but a big part of the problem was I was flat out overwhelmed by the Bible. I wasn't just impressed, I was super impressed by the heroes I read about, to the point it really unsettled me. And it was only after I had gotten knocked around a bit, and I quickly realized that I was going to need all of God I could get my hands on, and not just $3 worth, I began to see the people in the Bible through an entirely different lens. For the first time ever, I began to see them as real people. Not heroes, not superstars, not legends, but basic, garden variety, everyday people. See, before I had always viewed Abraham with kind of a reverence, and Noah and Moses as well, to the point I elevated such people to such an extent that they were practically godlike. And I reduced God in my mind as barely more than just another regular people. So I was far too over-impressed with them and way too under-impressed with God. But I don't think it's just me. Our whole world has deified people, and so humanized God that there's a sliver of difference between us, which I get because I did the same thing until I came to grips with 3 game-changing, and I might add, biblical principles that I've had to come to over the course of my life because, I don't know, when I'm struggling, these 3 things have really, really helped me. And so I want to share these 3 principles with you. I understand at first pass they may not seem all that significant, but these 3 principles, I believe, are going to help a whole lot of people here. So buckle in. You ready for principle number 1? Yeah. Thanks, Warren. Glad to have you back. Because this could blow your mind. Here's number 1. People are people, nothing more. Now, I can slow down if you think I'm going too fast, but that's the first big headline. People are people. Our world is not divided into the hyper-pious super saints over here and the average Joe ditch dwellers over here. No, we are all just plain folk. And when I say all, I mean all. And if you fail to remember that over the course of your journey, you're going to be way too impressed with people when you should only be impressed with God. And you'll spend your whole life switching it up from one hero to the next hero, then another hero, temporarily astounded by your most recent self-selected superstar because he's such a shining trophy of amazingness. But you'll also be hypercritical of other people that you consider to be lightweights, maybe even dead weights. But over time, if people are your primary focus, you're going to be disillusioned by the same people that you once had put up on a pedestal. Because everybody, all of us, every people I've ever known have feet of clay. You give anybody enough time and give them enough rope, and they're going to let you down. She's going to disappoint you because you foolishly made another people your hero. And his easily predictable failure then caused you to become cynical, discouraged, maybe even white-hot angry with God. Why? Because you forgot that people are just people and nothing more. And I don't care if he's one of those people who says, "Thank you, Jesus," 17 times a minute, or wears a different Christian t-shirt every day. People are people, including that believer that drives an 82 Civic and that lucky dog who tools around in a Corvette C8. People are just people. That includes the saint that can open his Bible to Habakkuk 2:18 in 3.7 seconds, as well as the dude who thinks that Habakkuk is something you hang between two trees and take a nap in. People are what? They're just people. And that includes pastors, just so you know. One of my least favorite things to do with a stranger is to reveal to them my true identity. Because as soon as people find out I'm a pastor, they start doing all kind of weird stuff. I had a car salesman shove his cigarette in his coat pocket just so I wouldn't see. Why would I care? Not my lungs. And guys beside me on airplanes who had been searching through porn, all of a sudden talking about what his pastor preached last Sunday. I've even had new neighbors, true story, visibly cringe when they realized that a preacher just moved in. They knew it was going to ruin the whole cul-de-sac. It's nuts, I tell you. So whenever I can, I just skirt the issue and tell them I'm a public speaker or an author. I'm in publishing, all of which are true. But I'll do practically anything to not admit I'm a holy man. But the principle stands nonetheless. Nobody but Jesus has walked on water. Am I right? So nobody but him, and I don't care how they may try to convince you otherwise, nobody has their stuff together. Nobody is pure, nobody is pristine and without defect, and this side of heaven we're never going to be. Contrary to popular opinion, folks, nobody has ever been. You do remember, don't you, Moses was a murderer? Noah had a drinking problem. King David struggled with lust. Samson was a sex addict. Abraham was a congenital liar, and Jacob was a scam artist. I realize it's hard to swallow in a culture where so-called heroes get elevated to almost worship status and pastors become celebrities. But the truth is, whenever you elevate people, other people get hurt. And the work of Christ takes it on the chin yet again. So principle number one is a simple reminder that you and I, we just need to be who we are and what we are, and give up this need to impress each other and to be impressed by each other, because we are all just plain old formed from the dust of the ground. What? And that includes everyone. And until you wrap your brain around that, you're going to watch people that you are certain have it all together, and you're going to think as a result, "Oh, I'll never make it." Here's the truth. They haven't made it either. There's only one who ever did, and he wasn't just people. He was God. Which brings us to principle number two. You ready? God is God, nothing less. All right, this sermon will get better. May take a while, but I promise. But it's true, God is God. The Bible says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He has always been the same. He will always remain the same. He will forever be God. Now, here's what I'm driving at. God is no less active today than he was in the days of Noah, or Joseph or Elijah or David. I say that because I hear people all the time saying, well, if I lived back in the Bible days, when God was really doing stuff, I could pull off this faith walk because God was shaking it up back then. Have you ever heard that? No, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is no less involved in your life than he was in Abraham's. Building the ark was no more important to him than building your family is today. And getting Peter fit to do service, that was no more important to God than getting you ready for service. Because just like Peter, you're God's child. So he's just as committed to you as he was to him. But even more significant, God is able. He's not locked into some time warp from the past. He is the God of all epochs and seasons. As David put it, our times, in fact, all times, are in his hands. Do you hear that? Our times, even these amazingly advanced, technologically adept, 21st century savvy times, even these times are in his hands. Some kids were recently asked, do you think God understands solar energy? Over 70% of them said no. When asked why, they said, well, because it's modern stuff. God can't possibly be up to stuff like solar. No. Our times are where? In his hands. He's the same yesterday, today, forever. He who made it all is able to maintain it all. He who sat on the throne at creation will remain on that throne throughout eternity. And Scripture says he holds all things together by the power of his hand. And nothing, the Bible says, no plan of God can ever be thwarted. In fact, the psalmist said, God does, you see it? Whatever he pleases. And why is that? Because God is God. Principle 3 gets us into the verses I really want to show you. You ready? Yep. Okay, I'll slow down. Okay. Miracles are miracles, nothing else. I know this is deep, but try to keep up, okay? People are people, nothing more. God is God, nothing less. Miracles are miracles, nothing else. I underscore that because if you listen to some prosperity preacher healer guy types, you may get the impression that you deserve and you really ought to be able to expect daily miracles. That if you're really walking with God, big-time breakthroughs are going to constantly be happening all over your life because God, he can, he will, he's going to miraculously fill that cavity in your mouth, give your brain answers to tests you didn't study for, and even miraculously reinflate your flat tire. Thank you for playing, but no. Remember the West Virginian that was caught running moonshine? Sheriff pulled him over, saw some jugs in the back seat and said, Sam, what's in them jars? Oh, Sheriff, that's just pure spring mountain water, that's what. Mind if I taste it? I don't mind a bit. Sheriff poked his finger in, licked it, and said, Sam, that's not water. That's at least 190 proof moonshine. Sam said, well, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. The Lord done gone and done it again. Sorry. That's not how he operates. Now, please don't mishear me. I believe that a miracle can happen anytime, any place, to anyone. It really can. Make no mistake, I believe in miracles. Miracles still happen. They do. But a miracle, by nature, is the exception. It's not the rule. By definition, a miracle is a humanly impossible event accomplished for the purpose of glorifying God. That's a miracle. And what that means is a miracle is an impossibility It's something mere people could never pull off. A miracle, if it truly is a miracle, defies both explanation and duplication. It's something so dramatic, so inexplicable, man could never repeat it. He can't explain it. He can't do anything but receive it. And dude, they exist, but not a lot of them. But can we be real? There never have been a lot of them. Miracles were never happening every Tuesday and twice on Thursday. And with that, I want to show you Hebrews chapter 11. If you'll turn there. As soon as I said that reference, some of you went, oh, yeah, that's the faith chapter. And you're right. But just because these verses list in bulleted points some of the most amazing and miraculous events in human history, and just because we can sit here today and read them one after another and then another and yet another, it doesn't mean that's how they happened. Trust me, Noah did not get a miracle a day to keep the devil away. He waited 100 years before he got a miracle. And yeah, Abraham, he received a miracle baby from God, but he waited 25 years between the promise and little Isaac. And Moses, it's true, he did pioneer the Exodus, but it was only after he spent 40 years in the wilderness. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? These people didn't have an inside track that you and I don't have. God was no more involved in their lives than he is in our lives. Hebrews 11 is just a list of people, who trusted in a God who was God, a God who accomplished miracles that truly were miracles, because miracles is what God does best. So slip all the way down to verse 29, because I want to show you 3 examples that powerfully illustrate those 3 principles and paint for us the story of some very human people who faced humanly impossible problems. But because God is God, miracles happen. So case number 1, verse 29, let's call it the waters of the sea. By faith, the people passed through the sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. Now, here's what I tend to think when I read that. I've never experienced anything even close to that, so I can't fathom how terrific those people must have been to receive that kind of miracle. But that reaction is wrong. And I want to show you just how wrong it is. Allow me to introduce you to the people who passed through those waters, because I want you to see the kind of spiritual giants these people were. In Exodus 14, it says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. So picture that. Blocking their forward progress is this huge body of water. On one side is the mountain range. On the other is the barren wilderness. The only way out is in the direction from which they had just come, except Pharaoh has suddenly changed his mind and has an army, and they're chasing after them. That's what I call an impossible situation. How did these spiritual superstars react? The Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. And they were what? Terrified, afraid. They were scared. Be smug, you're people too. You'd be just as scared. And driven by that fear, they lashed out at who? Moses, and said, was it because there were no graves in Egypt you brought us to the desert to die? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die out here. The first sign of trouble, these people, Amazing. They complained, they criticized, they panicked, they rebelled. Moses, I'd rather be stacking bricks back in Egypt than treading water out here. Whew. But see, that's the point. They were our kind of people. Are you with me? We can identify with this bunch because they were just people. And people are what? People. Those so-called saints in Exodus 14 were no better than you, and no worse either. They were simply afraid when they came face to face with an impossible situation, just like perhaps many of you are afraid as you face your impossibility. Anybody facing the Red Sea right now? Anybody? Just understand, God is very much in your story right now, and God is God. And so in this story, God told Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. In other words, quit whining, Moses. Moses is probably thinking, move where? Where do you want us to go? We're surrounded, God. Water here, wilderness here, mountains there. Where would you suggest I move? Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so the Israelites can go through the sea. What you talking about, Willis? And you know what happened? You know what happened because that's how you would respond too. You're a people too. And every people I've ever known, they would stand on the banks of that sea and go, God, this water, it's wet, not to mention deep. And we got elderly people and toddler people, and those Egyptians are right on our caboose, and they got chariots. Besides, even if we try to swim this thing, we're going to drown. But God said, it's going to be dry, Moses. Do you hear me? It's going to be dry. Because if you're a God that can do miracles, do it big, baby. Let's make water dry. See, God loves Red Sea experiences. He loves it when you get to a place where you cannot plow your way through. And the only thing you can do is look up. Because where else are you going to look? He loves it when we have to pray that one-word prayer that nobody likes to pray. Can anybody tell me what that one-word prayer is? Help! Of course! We're like the guy repairing his roof on his 3-story home. All of a sudden, this gust of wind blew him off his feet. He slid all the way down to the edge of the roof. He's hanging onto the gutter. Some of you know what those are. And he was screaming bloody murder. Help! Help! But nobody heard him. Finally, he looked up toward heaven and cried, is anybody up there that can help me? And a big voice boomed back, I am here. I can help you. Okay, what do I do? What do you want me to do? Let go. I will catch you. Is anybody else up there? Why? Because we don't like to let go. We hate saying help. And we really don't like Red Seas because we don't like getting wet. But God says you're not going to get wet. I said I would open it. I'm going to open it. You can't do that because you're just people, but I can because I'm God. So Moses stretched out his hand all that night. He drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and another on their left. Wow. Even though that miracle had never happened ever before, Moses, on a little sliver of faith, said, all right, God, this stuff is your thing. Here we go. So he rolled up his robe, held out his staff, and with eyes as big as bowling balls, he takes a huge Mother May I giant step, fully expecting to feel water. But there was no water. Because as soon as Moses planted his big hairy toe, which, by the way, that's something mere humans can do, right? That's when God did what only God can do. And he literally pushed that water right out of Moses' way, and Moses led a couple of million people right through that sea, but on dry ground. Now, in the movie, this crossing is portrayed as almost a single file march, but there's no way. Scripture never tells us how wide the opening was, but 2 million people plus livestock crossing that riverbed all between midnight and dawn. It's incredible. So I asked an engineer buddy to guesstimate the width the opening would have to be. And he figured that if the Red Sea was 5 miles wide, and if the people walked at a normal pace of 2.5 miles per hour, in order for 2 million people to get all the way across between midnight and dawn, the opening would have to be over 1 mile wide. In fact, a little bit over 1 mile, which is huge if you're a people, not so much if you're God. And sure enough, the people who earlier said, we won't go back to Egypt, we like onions, are now practically dancing their way to freedom. And that Egyptian army that had been pursuing them, they all drowned right on the spot. And how did it happen? Back to Hebrews. By faith. That's the only way Moses could have stepped into those waters. The only way that the people could have followed him. Walking through waters was an act of faith as mere people decided to place their trust in their great God. And I can just hear them, God, we're just people, but you're God. So if this thing's really going to happen, you're going to have to do a miracle. And all we can do is we'll trust you. Again, anybody here facing a Red Sea, some humanly impossible circumstance, and you don't see a way of escape. Well, I don't have a staff, and I don't wear sandals, and I'm not quite 80 years old. But I have a word from the Lord today for you. Trust him. And believe him for something so amazing, something that you on your own could never hope to do. Exactly what that intervention might look like, I can't say. Because when God calls you to follow, he rarely tells you how or when the riverbed is going to get dry. He just wants you trusting him. He wants you to burn your bridges and launch out into the deep with God alone as your only backup. The longer I live, the more I understand God never gives a guarantee regarding how your story is going to end. Abraham had no clue where he was going when God said, leave Ur. Noah had no clue whether that boat was even going to float. And Moses had no clue that the Red Sea would indeed part. All they knew is, God's called me. And so they moved out, even though how the story would be written was still very much in doubt. See, if you're only willing to buy $3 worth of God, you know where you're going to be for the rest of your life? On the shoreline, just standing there. Maybe complaining about having come so far and God let me down, doubting whether you're ever going to get any farther than you are right now. And it's on that shoreline that you will remain until by God's grace you get tired of all that whining and weary of the anger, weary of always coming up short and living in that God-forsaken land of what could have been, what might have been, what I wanted to have been. However, if you start believing that God really is God and that you want all of him that you can get your hands on, and not just $3 worth, then maybe, just maybe, God will be released to do something that only God can do. Back to Hebrews. There's a second case. It's called the walls of the city. I know you know these things. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. The whole story is in Joshua 6. If you want to turn there, let me just tell you about the wall. It was 30 feet high. That's 3 stories. It was also 6 feet thick, solid brick, separated by an inner space of another 12 feet, and then another inner wall, which was 12 feet thick, solid brick. So we got a 3-story brick double wall, 18 feet thick. And it's going to come down? Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in, I bet. But then God said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands." I love that line. You got to step into his sandals. Here's Joshua standing at the base of this 30-foot high brick double wall, a wall that's 12 feet thick, solid brick, a wall that went on for what seemed like forever. And God says, "See, I have delivered it into your hands." Really? Can't say I noticed. Some of these prepackaged Sunday school stories can be downright hilarious if you take the time to inject a little humanity, because that wall was huge. And yet God's saying, "Piece of cake, Joshy boy." And this crowd of Israelites wasn't any better than that first crowd. They had just spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness because they wouldn't believe in God. Bodies were strewn all over that wilderness until this crowd finally learned the hard way what you and I are learning today. We're just people, but God is God, and a miracle is a miracle. And we believe that God can still do miracles. A whole generation died off before they learned that lesson. And so here they are facing this huge wall. And yet God says, here's the plan. March around Jericho once a day for 6 days. Check. On day 7, the priests are to carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and you're to march around the city 7 times while the priests blow the trumpets. Got it? Then, when you hear those trumpets, everybody is to shout real loud. Okay. And then the walls will collapse. Say, what? Joshua probably thought, "Lord, I think I missed something." You're saying every day we march around this monstrosity 1 time, right? Right. On the 7th day we march around the same way, except we do it 7 times, right? Right. Then after the trumpets blast, everybody's supposed to scream? Right. Well, that's where things are kind of fuzzy, God. You're telling me the walls are just going to collapse? Right? Right. But that was the plan. Now, can you imagine General Joshua, going back to his rank and file, and tell him about this troop surge? A group of people not known for their great faith in the first place. But see, that's what makes living by faith so much fun. Because you usually get to do stuff that other people see is impossible. You're going to do what? In fact, something is wrong if what you do does make sense to unbelieving people. Clearly, this plan didn't. And yet, in the face of this foolishness, to their credit, the Israelite people said, "Well, let's do it." And they did. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark. Everybody lined up, dutifully marched around the city, went home, watched Netflix. Day 2, same drill. Days 3, 4, 5, and 6, same thing. Don't you figure about day 4, the people of Jericho are sitting up on the city wall having a field day? "Hey, look, Ethel, those idiots, they're back." Probably even throwing spitballs and saying, "What do those crazy Jews think they're doing?" But by now, the Israelites are so confident that God is going to do what God said he would do. They keep marching. And on day 7, they got up, marched around 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. And when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everybody charged straight in, and they took the city. Of course they did, because God is God, and he can easily handle mere walls. Don't you just love these stories? And they're not just stories. This is truth. Now, you and I sit here and we are just people. We're just one soldier in an army of soldiers dutifully marching around a wall. But since we are just people, you know what happens as we do our march? We get hung up on the incidentals and the unimportant. Stuff like who gets to walk at the front of the line. We care about that. And who gets to play first ram's horn. And who's going to carry the biggest flag. Because, see, we like to be seen. We want to be noticed. We need the applause. But you know what? There is not one word in Scripture about who blew which horn or who stood at the front and who stood at the back. And do you know why? Because this whole deal was God's thing. That's why. And the people just did as they were told. But because they did, God did a miracle and that wall came down. And everybody said, wow. Trouble is, not every wall comes down as quickly as the Jericho wall. And sometimes walls are confusing to us, and they seem impervious to destruction. Maybe you're facing just such a wall in your life. And if you're like most people, you've probably spent months just trying to manage the wall. And you're doing it all by your lonesome. Meanwhile, God is saying, look, I got the wall. Got it. The only thing you got to do is let me do what I alone can do. Besides, Stevie, you're not going to bring that wall down with that puny little ball-peen hammer you got, so put it down. Let me do the work. Anybody here got a relationship in the dumpster? Maybe you've got diseased cells running rampant through your body. Maybe it's a close friend who has betrayed you. Maybe there's news from your doctor that has you shaken. Listen, God specializes in walls, big walls, thick, impenetrable walls. And he can bring that same wall that you dread down to the ground. And he doesn't need your help. Listen, if God honors walking around a wall and screaming, why do you make things so complicated? Why not just say to him, God, my life is a mess, and this wall I'm facing, it's huge. Would you help me overcome it? Would you help me cross this mighty sea? I can't do it alone. I can't climb this wall without your help. And on top of it, God, I think I've lost my reputation. Which brings us to the final case, case 3, the welcome of the prostitute. Her name was Rahab. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Remember when the 12 spies were checking out the promised land? It was Rahab that kept them, remember? She gave them a place to sleep, and then helped them sneak away without being detected. A little bit earlier in Joshua chapter 2, she explained why she had done that. She said, when we heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea, our hearts melted for the Lord your God, for he is God. And on that tiny little shred of faith, Rahab stuck her neck out and protected those spies with just one stipulation: show kindness to me and my family. Spare our lives when you take the city. And that's exactly what they did. They told her to hang that scarlet thread from her window, and when the wall fell, her house was the only house left standing. Is that amazing? Joshua 6:25 adds, and she is still with us even today. In other words, Rahab got restored. Her dignity was returned. Is that incredible? Prostitute? Not to God, because she humbled her spirit before him. And she acknowledged that he was God, she was not. And that's when God came to her rescue. But that's not the best part of her story. Wish I had more time, but in Matthew chapter 1, it's the listing of the genealogy of Jesus, tracing the lineage of Christ. And you'll find in that list that there was a woman named Rahab. This Rahab. She married a man named Salmon. From that union was born a man named Boaz, who married a girl named Ruth. And from that union came little Obed, who was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David, the king. And it was from the lineage of David that Messiah was to come. And in fact, Jesus did come. Rahab, the prostitute, was the great-great-grandmother of King David. You don't get more messed up than prostitute. And that's what people do. We mess ourselves up. So just like me, just like you, that's what Rahab did. She made a mess of things. But by God's grace, she acknowledged that God really was Jehovah. And she did it with a little slender piece of thread. And miracles being what they are, God preserved her life. But even more, I've never recovered from this. You trace the genealogy of Jesus, Lamb of God, Prince of Peace, and there's the DNA of a prostitute. Now, if you're kind of stiff-necked, if you're spiritually stuffy and kind of snooty, you don't want to hear that. Because splaining that's kind of messy, maybe even embarrassing to spiritual you, but it's true. Even in the genetic markers and the chromosome map that forms Jesus, there is found the genes of a whore named Rahab. One more time. Anybody facing a Red Sea? From where you sit, there's no means of escape. Meanwhile, God is saying, I'll take you through. Or maybe you got a wall in your way, some obstruction that is separating you from other people. And even worse, it's beginning to separate you from your God. Because over the years, you've been building this huge wall, brick by brick, course by course. And though you desperately now want to break that wall down, you just can't. But listen to me, God can. He can. Maybe you got a reputation that you've tried to outlive. You've managed to totally trash your life. The good name of you and your family, it's just gone. Whatever you've done, it's not worse than prostitution. But since God is God, He can take your life and turn it around to His glory so that you are a shining, glistening trophy to His amazing grace. He'll help you start all over again. And here's the truth of this message. This room, it's filled with Rahabs. It's filled with unbelieving Israelites. We are no better. We are certainly no different. We're not worse either than Rahab or the whiners by the sea or those at the wall. We're just people. Just people. Even though, the really amazing people, still people. Our stories may read different. Maybe your sin list is way worse than mine. I don't know. But here's the fourth and final principle. sin is sin. You got it? So before you cluck your tongue at Rahab or me, anybody else for that matter, remember, we all come as needy sinners before a loving God. All of us need the very same thing, forgiveness and strength to carry on. People are people. God is God. And the only one you ought ever be impressed with is the Lord. And in Romans chapter 8, we're going to spend a lot of time there starting next week, right, Josh? Romans 8:31 says, if God is for us, who could be against us? You're going to hear a lot about that wonderful phrase, which is good because grace is a message you never get tired of.